into different languages. Our English translator is Ina, and our English speaking friends, please stay here in this Zoom room. To listen in to the other languages, please make your selection on the globe icon that says interpretation and choose the languages that you require. Our Chinese teachings will be translated by Hannah, Vietnamese by Lan An, and Japanese by Misao. This year, as you can see, some of us has this virtual background of Amitabha here. So this is a special virtual Zoom background that was designed for the Amidewa retreat. We do encourage everyone to download and use it for the retreat itself. Our admin has actually posted the link to download on the chat group. And a little bit about this background. So this design is by His Eminence Garchen Rinpoche, and he said that this is what appears to him when he closes his eyes to think about Amitabha. Indeed, we hope that you can also download this very special background and change it and use it together with all of us. Next, for all our panelists, please help us to rename yourselves to the name as per your registration form. This is for our ops team to recognize you and to identify you, and then it would be easier for us to troubleshoot in case of any issues. You are allowed to turn on your video, but please do minimize all the movements, when you on your video. Dear Dhamma brothers and sisters, we are just a few moments away from the commencement of today's teaching. If you have yet to do so, you may like to perform the 3 prostrations in front of Buddha, get settled in before the start of this retreat. I will now pass it over to Chow, Sister Chow, who will explain to our Vietnamese Dhamma friends on the choosing of the Vietnamese channel. Chow, over to you.
Thank you, Chin. Dạ thưa quý vị đạo hữu Việt Nam, với những quý vị mới mà mình chưa biết á, thì để mà mình chọn kênh tiếng Việt thì xin quý vị bấm vào cái nút có cái hình quả địa cầu và mình chọn cái phòng Việt Nam để mà mình nghe tiếng Việt. Nếu mà quý vị nào mà mình chưa thấy cái biểu tượng đó, hoặc là khi mà mình nhấp vào mà mình không thấy có chữ Việt Nam, có nghĩa là cái phiên bản Zoom dù là trên điện thoại hay là laptop mình đang dùng cũng chưa phải là phiên bản cập nhật mới nhất. Do đó xin quý vị mình thoát ra, nếu mà mình chưa thấy thì mình cập nhật phiên bản và sau đó mình vào lại thì chắc chắn là mình sẽ thấy cái phòng tiếng Việt. Và xin quý vị nhanh chóng hoàn thành để mà mình có thể nghe được chương trình pháp hội sắp bắt đầu ạ. Xin cảm ơn. Thank you, Chin.
Thank you. We'll hold on for a while for the arrival of Garchen Rinpoche. Tashitele Rinpoche, Tashitele Tosin Rinpoche. Good morning.
Good morning,
Rashidele Aibar Sangar Pajakar Jopasaman Rashidele.
Rinpoche says Tashidele to everyone on the live stream.
We'll begin with the opening prayers in the yellow prayer book on page 1. All mother sentient beings, limitless as space, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience. May they experience happiness, be free from suffering, and swiftly may they attain precious, unsurpassed, perfectly complete enlightenment. All mother sentient beings, limitless as space, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience. May they experience happiness, be free from suffering, and swiftly may they attain precious For that purpose, until I attain Buddhahood, I will apply my body, speech, and mind to virtue. Until death, I will apply my body, speech, and mind to virtue. From today until this time tomorrow, I will apply my body, speech, and mind to virtue. Now we'll do the mandala offering on page 7. An infinite array of worlds, each with 4 continents and the wealth of infinite oceans of realms. If I bring them all to mind and offer them without exception, please hold with compassion all the beings they contain. My body, enjoyments, and whatever I own, my aggregates, elements, and sense sources, my aspirations now and in times to come, as well as everything I grasp as mine, by offering them all, may I be blessed with the end of self-grasping, completely liberated from the bounds of real and unreal, transcending the names and concepts of arising, cessation, and abiding, coming and going, affirmation and denial. The supreme mandala is the natural state. By offering it, may I be blessed to attain the state of Buddhahood.
Om Guru Dewa Drake Rena Mandala Pati Zazoa Senjanam Jasambata Loya Sarajadava Chedyon Tumon Tegaye Chudyan Kolo Gordu So
requesting teachings on page 10. Please turn the wheel of the Dharma of the greater and lesser vehicles and the teachings common to both according to the dispositions and mental capacities of sentient beings.
Thinking about the telling anything, got this also what telling anything, so no got conservation, Sanjikan, Sapa, Shiva, Tashiva, the same Koran, it is Shiva, Shiva, the shape in Naka, Japso, then the Malaribe, Nakata, Gonji, Japto, Gonji, some little doors on the Teta, your song. Tata, Chinese do this, Chinese for the Mokuche, Theatre Lazaret.
So today, Dharma friends, I'm going to give a brief introduction on Shamatha and calm abiding. And so now generally, what is Shamatha? So in the lineage of the practice lineage of blessings, in the tantric lineage, the nature of the mind is given many different names. For example, it is referred to as Dzogchen or Mahamudra and so on. Lord Jigten Sumgen said in the Gongchik, in the very beginning, it said, the Buddha only showed the fundamental nature of all phenomena. So that is really the essence of the teachings. So what that refers to is really the nature of the mind. So it is all speaking about the nature of the mind, the fundamental nature of reality and so on. And so Jamgyal Kongtrul also had said, I have not recognized that my own mind is Buddha. And then also, who said that first, that one's own mind is Buddha? It was the Buddha himself who said, all sentient beings are actually Buddhas. And so then if one just hears that and looks around, one may think that, how can this be? And it's hard to believe because we see all these suffering sentient beings, like the humans and the animals and so on. Who can really be certain that they are actually Buddhas? And then also Jigten Sumgen had said, karma, cause and effect, is the natural manifestation of the moment-to-moment thoughts. And the Buddha had said, all beings are actually Buddhas, however, they are obscured by adventitious stains. And so that adventitious stain is the clinging to an I, the clinging to a self. And that is what temporarily has caused the mind to freeze into like an ice block, like water freezing into an ice block. And temporarily, as a result, the 6 kinds of sentient beings all appear separately. And so if one doesn't realize the nature of one's mind, one can not become liberated from this state of samsaric existence. And so the nature of the mind is just like a vast ocean. And that is what we call Buddha nature. It's the natural state of the mind is our Buddha nature. And all sentient beings possess that nature. And that nature is like water, but water appears in many different ways. For example, some beings are like ice blocks, and some are like ocean water or like lake water and so on. Water appears, or like tap water and all of that. Water appears in all kinds of different forms. But what is the root of all of that? In the 37 practices, it says, all suffering without exception comes from wishing for one's own happiness. So this adventitious obscuration that the Buddha spoke of is the fixation, the grasping at an I, at a self. So this thought of me always arises in the mind. And if you don't recognize this thought of I, this me, you can never become liberated. So recognizing it is just like understanding that the nature of ice is actually water. So when you recognize that, you know that actually ice is just a temporary state. It's adventitious. And now when you recognize the nature of water, this is like seeing the nature of the mind. And then wherever you go in the 6 realms of samsara, all these endless sentient beings, they all have that same mind. And nobody has a different mind. It's one and the same. And then you begin to understand the Buddha's teaching when he said all beings are actually Buddhas. And you see that that is because Buddha pervades all minds, all sentient beings' minds. So whoever has a mind has this nature. Also in the Samantabhadra prayer, it says, there is a single ground, yet two paths and two fruitions. Actually, everything is included within that. So when you realize the nature of the mind, that is what we call a Buddha, and really nothing else. Also, Chikden Zumgen had said, people are confused, gone astray by grasping at three names, which is Mahamudra, Dzogchen, and the Madhyamaka middle way. And so then in his quote in the Gongchik, he says that the ultimate nature is free, is untouched, remains untouched by the three great ones, which are those three, Mahamudra, Dzogchen, and Madhyamaka. And so this is how he had ascertained the true nature of the mind. It cannot really be given any name, but so then temporarily it is called many different names. And also, so that leads back to the first quote by Chikden Sumgön in the Gongchik, that the Buddha had only taught the fundamental nature of all things. That's all the Buddha said. And so what it all comes down to is to realize the natural state of the mind. And so when the Buddha himself, when he attained enlightenment, he actually, upon attaining enlightenment, he instantly expressed the nature of the mind by saying the nature of the mind is profound, and it is peaceful, it is free from elaboration, and it is luminous. And the great scholars can elaborate on that extensively. There is so much you can speak on just those four terms of how the Buddha described the nature of the mind. And so it is profound and peaceful. So peaceful, the nature of the mind, the natural state of the mind is peaceful. And another example is like space or like an ocean. Therefore, Milarepa also said you should meditate on your mind like an ocean or like the sky. And so this is how you realize the mind when you actually see its nature, like space, like the sky, or like an ocean. And so this is what I'm going to introduce you to today briefly. So today I will speak briefly on the nature of Shamatha, or calm abiding.
내로 도저히 같이 보여 봤자고 그래 내로 또 가리 펜에서 놀로 마도 가리 내고도 대상마다 일도 다만 대화만 두고 서쪽당이 올 말이 선대 용이 대화도 보다 동네만도 가리 대는들이 동네시 벌써 정말 전에도 오도 나들어서 남들은 바탕에 장급에 동지 동네이 실 도가를 도가도 소시 동네시 대들이 pen 타탄고서 메타토로 냠데요레 메타토로 체벌 카레 오타 레기레 레데 소크레스 레데 셈비스 소지 셈만 또니 레롱 지서 저는 레롱시 바데 카레 뉴모 바던 제베 샵데 레롱 지요레 이식을 롱들 내고 내로 돈 롱들 이식을 롱면 전도고 이식을 롱들 나디 이요 말에 세고 내로 돈 이식을 롱면 전 이식을 롱들 안 요래 레롱탄 유목을 롱텔라서 뒤치파게 레롱을 지선 장소에서 이제 뒤수 공부 송이 준비 기적 삼을 적이 유목 같으니 란주 바지 제리 정대 간다 서가서 이노 이 레지 배우지 메니데다 로로 심지 장이 바탕지 맞다도 냠데요레 대토지 제땅을 섭다 딱대땅을 그 생직발 대화도 보다 동의 모두 어찌 같이 따르지 얘가 루치했다 그랬지 가리게 줘서 저기 줘서 그게 just 셈리 유목의 왕의 줘서나 레롱들이 레롱다 이식을 롱대 가가 하고 그래 그래서 다음에 바톤이 레롱거 가서 성공을 도와로 가고 쳐서 그쪽으로 라마요 말에 빼내서도 몇개 시당나 기당 쳐보달라나 오 이식을 놓는 내 시당에 진짜지 무슨 일이 시당 메롱다고 시들 시당 하다 생사와 차도를 오다 대시 세부 내lok도 보이면 뒤에서 님은 동나의 시간을 just 그거래 야, 생그 내로 막도는 유명한 대왕도 소리 들어가는 저 가로들이 저 내롱 짓었당. 들이 봐도 들이 좀 이렇게 쭉 삼아서 이서 제 차선에 자 대신 오다 능내만 놀라 다다다 생내로 또 그래지. 들금 진로 진행 옆에 손발이 명하거든요. 내로 또나 투박 공도 매서 다다다는 것도 사기는 좀 참아를 남겨는 양기요래 다음 중시 쭉서라서 양기요래 제 당신 탈톡관에 그런 세분대로 또 제 코너를 대에 또다들이 투박공을 내로 하고는 내로 또나 투박공을 조금 그런 신앙 잘한 것은 말이 나도 그는 요래 되게 탐지를 때는데 오 개바 탐지 오나서 긴 고독치 그 깔머니 제로 서지 나자가 되니 막 또다 대서 나자가 똑같이 요래 대서 좀 개바 저봐 사망 성격들은 어따게 당한 내로 돌이 당한 ред도 선지로 사실 그냥 생각되는 바보는 그리 때는 내로 기반에 당마지 따와 탐지 내로 기는 쳤다 그래 더버려지 내로 때는 락 심지고 들어간다고 그래 사지 심지니 이거만 락 심내로 하고는 파사지 심지 하고 더고요 그래
So it's important. It's important that we really see the importance of realizing the nature of the mind. There's nothing more important, and that's why you should think about the benefits of realizing the nature of the mind and the shortcomings of not realizing the nature of the mind. And that's because everybody wants to be happy. There's no one who doesn't want to be happy. And that's because we have a mind. Everyone with a mind wants to be happy and does not want to suffer. And so that's why when we train in the graduated path, we begin with the recognition of suffering. The Buddha said, first you must understand, recognize suffering. And then we train in the 4 thoughts that turn the mind and so on. So first we must recognize our own suffering. So for example, in this world, humans and animals live together. But what's the difference? The difference arises due to karma. We appear differently because of karma. And who has created karma? The mind has created karma. And the mind creates karma when you follow your thoughts and afflictive emotions. And so that is when the mind follows the karmic winds. And so that is when then one's intelligence becomes afflicted. That is when one follows the karmic winds. And then there is the wisdom winds. And that is when you realize the nature of the mind, then all these karmic winds, your wind energies all transform into wisdom winds. And there is, in that state, there is no duality between self and other. And so therefore the wisdom wind possesses freedom and the karmic winds not. You follow, you're pulled by these karmic winds. And so now when you follow your afflictive emotions, that is when you're carried away by karmic winds. And so regarding that, Jigten Sumgön had said, cause and effect is the natural manifestation of one's moment-to-moment thoughts. So when just ordinary, unrestrained reflections arise in the mind, and we act on them, this karma will ripen. And it ripens in the manifold appearance of the limitless sentient beings in the 6 realms of samsara. For example, the humans and the animals living together. And so when you look at those animals, for example, their mind, and you look at your own mind, the mind is one and the same. They all want to be happy and they do not want to suffer. Everyone has the very same wish. There's no difference. But the difference in our appearance is also created by the mind. It is because the mind has become controlled by afflictive emotions and therefore is controlled by the karmic winds. So it's important that you understand the difference between the karmic winds and the wisdom winds. Because then if you are controlled by the karmic winds, then also later in the bardo, after you have died, it is these karmic winds that will bring you to birth anywhere in the 6 realms of samsara. And you have no freedom as to where to go if you are taken by karmic winds. For example, if a person gets really angry and they possess the wisdom winds, they get angry, but they instantly recognize, oh, this is anger. And then the anger becomes the mirror-like wisdom, because then all there is crystal clarity in the mind. So that's the quality of realizing the nature of the mind, because then you can transform the 5 poisons, the afflictions, into wisdom. When you do not realize the nature of the mind, you will become controlled by the afflictive emotions. And as a result of that, you will be taken by the karmic winds to take birth anywhere in the 6 realms of samsara. So cause and effect is the natural manifestation of the moment-to-moment thoughts. And this is how it then manifests also in the bardo. So if you do not want to suffer, you have to realize the nature of the mind. Also, the omniscient Longchen Rabcham had said in the Mengatsu, the Treasury of Pith Instructions, he said, when you realize the nature of the mind, there is no higher learning than that. And so this is really what we train in, whether we follow the Sakya, Gelugpa, Kagyu, and Nyingma lineage. All the stages of the path are for the sake of that, or for example, practicing 13 years in retreat and so on. Whatever path you go, it is in order to realize the nature of the mind. It's all for that sake. And it is just that sometimes it is misunderstood, or it is kind of this view is not seen. And then we make divisions between I am Mahamudra, I'm a Mahamudra practitioner, and he's a Dzogchen practitioner. And now what he's saying is contradictory and so on. And so then pride arises in the mind, and pride arises because one has not realized the nature of the mind. So actually what we need to see is that all of these teachings, whether it's Mahamudra, Dzogchen, or any other teaching, they all say the same thing, and they all are for the purpose of realizing the nature of the mind. And so then you can just think of it in very simple terms and think that it's enough if I just realize the nature of the mind. And if you decide upon that, then through this certainty, you will realize the nature of the mind. And so the view is all the different views need to be brought into one single essence. That's important. And so that essence is the need to realize the nature of the mind. And that is all you need to do. All you need to do is realize the nature of the mind. And once you realize the nature of the mind, you will understand, then you will really understand how Buddhas and sentient beings are actually non-dual. So when you realize the nature of the mind, then you don't have to look outward and try to see how they are Buddhas. But when you realize the nature of your own mind, you will naturally understand how all sentient beings are also Buddhas.
산쪽선 나바 이인이들이 강 가르쳐하는데 오통당 산쪽전 가르쳐버려서 대레레티들 남용 달나들이 다른 그도 산쪽선대 때서 짜치버리 리샤 랑타위나 강리지나 다시네디나 색다른 남상신의 공신이나 같이 내 터봐야 요래 양 문제를 해주죠. 내 손을 대 지서들이 양 대가 다른 값에 양이 선진을 하면 좋은 거요래. 강자정 부족상 속성은 나상니 다시네서 이런 부족상 속성들이 사바세비 빠지를 대가랑지랑지신의 차대요래. 대를 또 랑주 봐요말 인피를 왔다 제리 제는 배는 사바세비적 곰 냠지 놈에서 이런 제지된스 무슨 말이 진나 제세소 남초 마게 재미 이시체 니스면 성거죠 너또 제세 답게 인피로 소남지 초세바 인피로 왔다 문제가 소남지 시작다 민진들 로티 송고요래 대다의 차고 되들 마치 재미있어도 대가면 라지는 나버리 야송들 라지를 쓰레지 차기 요래 나도 뉴모바라 바탕지 셔로래 셔를 대셔 대전을 이피를 로티 라지들이 내가 차기를 대들들이 구독사 접선도 토장을 되들 들으시는 양들랑들이 대보용 거요래 갑들이 대들들이다 구독사 접선 삼바 재미들 저도 거기들이 신에가 하나 삼바 재미들 제배 방법들이 서로 뭐 탐지를 삼바를 찾는 디들이랑 내 통적 거버가들이 신에가 남상 대주 신에기를 강례들을 구독사 접선 유럽에는 삼바 재미있잖아 심지 탐지 세대진 상대에 하고 내가 로로 단진데 단진을 지는 유명한 데를 디지에다 레지지 요구하기 쇼도가 돼 하고래 동고 심지 말아 봐 하고 그래 오 상지 세면내로 세면내로다 상지에서 심지 이제 막 디디디 하고 대 하고들이 대해서 막 띠모용 거를 때려들이 삼바 재미를 띠내지는 냠들라나 띠모용 거래
This thought that there is two kinds of bodhicitta, and which of these two is more important. So you might immediately feel that, oh, it's the ultimate bodhicitta that's most important. And yes, on the one hand, that's true, but then also you have to look at your own personal experience, where you are on the path. And from that perspective, the relative bodhicitta is a little bit more important, actually. And so how do we practice it now in relation to shamatha or calm abiding? So shamatha or calm abiding is still a tranquil meditative state. And in the beginning, most people, no one is really able to instantly stay in this state of calm. There are a few people who are able to do that instantly, and that is due to their past karmas. But even then, even if you're able to stay in a state of shamatha, then when we again rise from the meditation and go into our daily activities, again, these ordinary unrestrained thoughts and afflictions arise in the mind. And so that is because the shamatha that you have cultivated is not founded in the relative bodhicitta. And so it is actually necessary to, before you practice shamatha, that you cultivate a firm basis of immeasurable love, which is the relative bodhicitta. And if you have developed immeasurable love, actually that the nature of that itself is shamatha, because then when there is immeasurable love, no ordinary unrestrained thoughts will arise. So therefore it is better to develop shamatha together with or on the basis of an altruistic mind or immeasurable love. Also, Thigten Sumgön had said that when thoughts arise, then you cultivate love. Then it becomes an accumulation of merit. And when nothing arises, when things arise, it's like that. And when nothing arises, then you rest in the unborn, unarisen state of primordial wisdom. And in this way, the two, merit and wisdom, become unified. And so we can also say that this is the union of wisdom and compassion. So this is how they become unified. And so when thoughts arise, so when you're in your activities, you cultivate immeasurable love, you cultivate bodhicitta. And then when that has become firmly established, then when nothing arises, which is when you meditate, you will actually be able to just rest naturally in a meditative state. And naturally all the coarse thoughts and afflictive emotions will be pacified. So that depends on altruism. When altruism has arisen, the mind will naturally be still or in a calm state. So that is the relative bodhicitta. And shamatha should be founded first on the relative bodhicitta, and then shamatha will become stable. So the relative bodhicitta is the immeasurable love that you sustain on an ongoing basis before you engage in meditation practice in all your activities. You cultivate immeasurable love. And that is, you see everything, even just things, objects, everything is pervaded by your love, everything at all. And then when you, on the basis of that, when you meditate, the mind will instantly be in a tranquil state. And that is because of immeasurable love, all pervasive love. So this is how you should meditate on Shamatha in the beginning. And so also on the basis of this, when you cultivate immeasurable love, it is also on the basis of that you can then understand that actually all sentient beings have that nature, the nature of mind, and they only are temporarily obscured by self-grasping and the afflictive emotions and controlled by karma. So also through having love as a basis, you will even realize that. And then you will also realize that actually, ultimately, none of these sentient beings possesses any true existence. And you realize that our basis, the ground, is one and the same. The mind of all the Buddhas, your own mind, and of all sentient beings. So you realize that on the basis of such calm, which is founded in immeasurable love, or the relative bodhichitta. So in brief, if you practice shamatha meditation on the basis of immeasurable love, then your practice will become stable.
카시르들이 약합 되는지 보여는 이랑 소소를 내거든요. 남만아 도들이 대서 찍바 말이 물을 못 지는 대서 제발 요래 대답게 다 되리 저기 끼찍 삼라서 소소들이 다다 대서 고독을 내 그래. 고독 사촉 섭시바데 다다 사바체미를 보고 요래야. 대르티는 사바체미나 어디 라기가 이모가 차단을 봐. 요말에 대르티니 고도 사적 생겨 제거들이 내가 하면 되와 들이 진님 제가 더봐 별니리 예송나들이 물을 못 제려 톱 제일어들은 내가 내가 동네 상제시오는 타톡 상제 된 타톡 상제 더 저런저거래 대가리 상제시 받들이 나디도 삽도 송은 나디도 차로를 가르다고 해는 대샵도 삽도 소리 들이 차로를 쳐져서 들이 쳐대 잡도록 타톡 대 타톡 다톡을 대봐서 뭐래 내가 동네시 와라 들고 사적선 이거 뒤에 하고 당고서 사적도 이거 뒤에 하고 될때는 레좀를 진도가 제고 들이랑 게 들이 다사바체미 이렇게 들이 제와 나서다 레좀들을 뒤니 들이 미상하더니 랑 청랑을 주고 두고요 배 랑 먹이 같은 게 제말을 배송을 게트 쪽 쇼크를 좀 느껴랑 이 내에서 다송 사tuk스리 이거 대다랑 이 차요 그래 대다고 잡을까비 드림네시레데 오 실레당 보는 드리들이 돈하고 실레 땅 공략자 장을 그 라도 세븐네로 한시서 말에 너무 빠단 범라서 말에 너무 빠단 벌어다 무슨에 건 벌었더니 드리 다치 나가다 보고 이제 상담 나가 체배 받지 내로 때는 검정 내로 세븐네로 또 뭐가니 세븐나가 체매바 차요 뭐래 예멜레 송래 세븐나가 체매 죽으러 좀 봐요 어때면 내로 세븐네로 보내지 되레시 다 하고 뭐래 야 되나더니 나팔 건데 내가 아들 쇼핑 건데 좀만 되지 그봐요 뭐도 어떤 맛이들이 로빈 남도 총소리 이제 그렇게 무엇이만 맞아봐 내가 그 파들이 또 만나 넘버 또 당도 또 쳐봐서 넘버 또 뒤 넘도 대라 또 당 뒤지서 차당 차오 그래도 차오 그지서 장선 그게 레사 무엇도 sem망도 쇼로 요래 야 나또 샤양 될 주도메가 제들이 오 로빈 남고 저소리지 배를 잡도 따고는 바람이 못 들지 오 바람 잡수 저소리 잡수를 하는 건데 쇼서 제따로 생은 남도 생 코로나에서 말해 생 코로나에서 대랑 니지 줄오 자다는 세면나고 내 사고도 나지 인지인들은 되게 레사거든 레디가 이마다 그래서 대도 하고서 들이 짜다라는 생각 라는 생각 드신다는 것들은 남도 좋을 마저를 셔도 성교리 성통도 좋을 거리 세고 내려도 또 설마 들이변에 짜죠 봤다가들이 세고 시합게 들이 무엇도 집이 봐도 대토 대용디지 대다하고 뭐들이 대단남도라고 차로 대단지 람기인들은 뭐들이 딱 좋동나 그 람기인 소교수 람차랑들 벨레처럼 뭐지 대다고 저기 들이 좋다들이 남도 탐지에서 잡아 들이 세랑 시설들이 대다 내 턱을 저들이 다시래 들이 다시래 다시래 망고 송구요지 대들은 돈이 이제 선능시발라 사람들 마음대로 송 심라를 말을 받으지 sab도 노래들이 시합체로 요래 벨 잡죠 체벌 용만에 비춰서 삼들 잡지 샤고 속자다면 통통고 요래 잡죠 가시들이 용만이 지처럼 잡죠 저 총총적이라더니 같은 통통고 요래 대회다다 공철이고 뭐를 세고 빼는 똑같이 뭔가 부채가 별로요. 샘맞기나 살 초반으로 당저 또 맨날 저 용마지지 저 동배가야 알랑 저리야를 때는 어때 용마지 당거리지 쌀고를 똑똑히 써야 여기 포랑기 야야 나를 노래해서 대들 오 대비야 대냐면이는 남도라서 안전하게 주도 받아서는 남발부터 봐서 남발부터 남도 잘 내가 말이 셔야 될 주도 마셔라 주도 마셔야 싫어하는 속말을 남도 상기 총기게 시바 되게 총기게 시바 되게 대 남도 마상어들 하나랑 지메 봐 들이다가 나와 탐절한 것인데 센터 나도 자사 차렸다지 센제를 나갔다 차서 뒤강리더니 라게 세고 쳐 라블을 하고는 들이대리 좀 봐 들이더라기 자녀를 torture 들이제 들이다 플랫폼에 들이세내로 랑 제탑 내가 돼서 네트와 내리마 제들은 남도 촬영되고 니바메라 대차들이 세분내로 랑시 때문에 이제 와메바 실랑 총마셔 와서 들이대 가세 되나 촬영도 와메와 들이랑 촬영 도서 나도 촬영도 와메와 참을 갑들이 다 세분내로 네 들이 싹동시고 쌀랑지 저는 남도 요면 하고 요래 똥되는들이 강차와들 파야를 참아 맞아버려 뒤다가 하고는 들이 다들이 다시네 들이 세비용 뒤다 하고 들이 유는 거는 제가지 방식에서 들이 실내에 연대에서 보는 들이 다들 sem싸워 대라더니 쌍통성은 딱 그래 쌍통지 말까 그러더니 흔치 마통의 세문에서랑 눈이 통도 마통도 그 세문에 비해 싸워 뒤보 치모 오 저다 사자 치모서 문이 오내 남가다 가서 잡대요 봐 별라고 별로 탐지 잡대요 가서 가라 그래서 나와서 이제 남게까지 잡대요 봤는데 라지 진냠용제 가리 세마 미식제 뭐래 대체들이 공부하는 명당들과 진짜 말을 배워 또 죽었단 말아 라고 공부하면서 어떤 이들 냠명들이와 공통된 냠명을 때문에라고 냠명 무슨 소바티 다음 무슨 때문에라고 세면 냠명라고 또 오래 저랑 살라고 죽은 거요래 저것들이 고아sam들이 고아들 야전들이 고아들 빙시사 통보는 양선용요래 몰라리 벌송책 학장 개치고 뭐바 냠명들이와 뭐바 고아들이라서 매 다 등산 삼아 고아들 고성도 하고서 사람을 시에고로 땅에 참아시에 토고요 오지 철권을 그냥 미시라 그때부터 내 소용 말이 배라 그러면 남도 뭐라니까 대왕도 소를 거래 그때 소를 마셔 때는 개바탕 지어라는 딱 되나 오 우리 맞대로 차도 오 라게 냠는 되고 도선 들이대 대다로 살못하는 들이대 뭐만 냠용단 되가 신에게 냠용게 가리 Tambu, not all our child around Roland over. There is not all the language same with Zayma, Danyam. Niba, part you do, Dana Tigi in Chodova, or not a darling. The Redo Tardini didn't try to teach you Chodova. They she up more things on Sana. The said the ages of Matter Wateri, Catcher Chana, no more. They thought the Tiga no water that have been jumping on the Sadoji, but I'm the theater in Yamu, jumping on Tadom and Dictionary, Baratman Castle Road. Not Peter, not on Los Angeles. She Barat more jump. They try to say Macabre. That young my dear was a detail, Charlie. So, long of young you mom, he did they talked to the lottery, but they got the German what on top of it. That just a bit of just an adjective of the third down at Tela. Peter says that the non secret now was a liver, now secrets are down over it. Secrets are down, secrets are not a career, new or title Shanghong Tower totally Shanghong Tower the new or that Jago. When it's a native Shanghong is on the rest of the Shanghong Tower, not reaching any Yunbo. Rather too long countries in a chat on the state or chat over in Yuntar or council Goma Gome Bas, Goma Chipa Meva. They much about the Lisha Shanghong so there. She leave Carreri, oh, not Tanset travel center. Or they half on it, Shanghong Carreri, Digon not to Jim, not to Jim, but she means their lot of it. Shibate. Shiba Tium, deleted Rangan took to those. Oh, Number less at the mother, less from those. Not all Rancharan already. Yajan, Laboratory, Laboratory, Matobium, theater, reti, Tinam Note, half on this Yaboyos are.
So, and the relative recurrent relative bodhicitta. So now we can see in this world, for example, the nature of now happiness and suffering. When we just look around at people's situation in the world. So right now, nowadays, there's so much suffering in the world. And even though there's so much suffering, there are still some people who do not suffer at all. For example, they're healthy in their bodies and they experience no mental suffering. There's many people like that. Some people are very happy. Or, for example, on the other hand, for example, a country might experience great well-being, but still, even though the country is generally in a state of happiness and well-being, there are people in a country who experience a lot of suffering. And that is all because of their individual karma. So that's why not everyone's experience of things is the same. And even though we all have a precious human body, the experience is not the same. So that is why Thigden Songkhan said, cause and effect is the natural manifestation of the moment-to-moment thoughts. So now we are speaking from the relative perspective, the relative bodhicitta. So the relative bodhicitta means that we need to cultivate immeasurable love. If immeasurable love arises in your mind, then no ordinary, coarse, afflictive emotions will arise just naturally. That is the result of the relative bodhicitta. And so as a result, one experiences happiness, the temporary happiness of the gods and the human states. And for example, it is said, if you practice a Nyingna retreat a single time, you create the cause for a precious human body. So as a result, suffering is temporarily pacified, but ultimately also it becomes the cause for attaining Buddhahood. And so how is that? It is because when you cultivate love, then like the Buddha, for example, and the Buddha only cultivated love. And in this way, the self-grasping became weaker and weaker. It diminished more and more. It's just like a snow mountain, a glacier, the ice melting all into water. And in the end, all that water then has merged with the vast ocean. And that's when the Buddha had realized the ultimate truth. But for that, it is important that one first recognizes the relative level, that one cultivates relative bodhicitta, that you understand the qualities of immeasurable love. Because if you understand immeasurable love, you will really consider karma very carefully. Also, when immeasurable love arises within you, you will naturally understand past and future lives and karma. And such a person will have their own law. They won't require any other law. They will naturally keep all the laws on their own. They will refrain from all negative action. That's why Milarepa also said, then the 10 virtuous actions arise naturally, and the 10 non-virtuous actions settle in their natural state, dissolve on their own. That is the quality of the relative bodhicitta. That's the nature of immeasurable love. And also that's related now to the shamatha practice when we engage in meditation practice. So the meditation practice must be founded in the relative bodhicitta. And if it is founded in relative bodhicitta, it leads to a stability that allows you to always be able to stay in the natural state of the mind. It gives you this state of calm that allows you to stay in the natural state. When Milarepa taught meditation to his disciple Bardabum, he said to her, first, practice shamatha. When you practice shamatha, calm abiding, meditate on your mind like the sky. And the mind is not different from space. And so then she practiced and she looked at her mind like the sky. And then she reported back and said, however, when I rest within the sky, I am feeling well, but then clouds begin to arise and that unsettles me. And so Milarepa then replied, let it all be. When you are well, when you feel well, when you rest in space, continue to rest in space. When when clouds arise in the sky, see them as the magical display of space itself, not separate from space, and just rest in space. Clouds not being separate from space. And in this way, there is no more difference between conceptuality and non-conceptuality. If you just let whatever arises be. And when you realize that, when you're able to rest within such a state, you realize that mind is like space. And when you realize that mind is like space, then Milarepa said, you have then actualized the Dharmakaya, you have realized the Dharmakaya. And so when thoughts arise within the mind, sometimes very subtle thoughts of hope and fear and so on, if you follow these thoughts, those subtle thoughts of hope and fear, you will accumulate karma. Because if you follow these thoughts, you will cling to the true existence of your fears. And then karma will be created. So thoughts can arise, but don't be bothered by them. Don't cling to them. Just see them like a cloud appearing in the sky, not being separate from the sky. Or, and Milarepa also said to Bardabum, meditate on your mind like an ocean. And when the waves appear on the ocean, see the waves as the magical display of the ocean and not separate. And when waves appear, rest in the ocean. So when you recognize this, you see that all the thoughts arise from the mind itself. So just like the clouds arise from the sky itself. It is just when you begin to cling, when you see things in a dualistic way, and you think that, oh, there's this thought that arises, and you believe in this thought, because first of all, you believe in that reality of self and other. Then you follow that thought. That is when you create karma. And of course, in the end, that karma is also illusory. So in any case, it all depends on how you see things in your own mind. That determines whether or not you will liberate the thoughts arising in the mind. And so that is what happens when we come to Vipassana, or special insight. That is when the thoughts are liberated upon arising. That is when you actually have realized the nature of the mind. And that is, it possesses a sharpness, which is like metal, like iron, cutting iron, like metal cutting metal. The mind, your wisdom is so sharp that it can cut through any concept of grasping at a concrete reality or any concept structure in your mind, even the most subtle thought that arises. So don't analyze whatever arises, and then it will just go away. Things arise on their own and they are liberated on their own. And so this is how you meditate, like the mind being like water or like space. And in the end, when you habituate to that, the mind will become non-conceptual or free from any thoughts. So and that is when you are able to sustain such a state. And the sustaining is the state of calm. So first, when you practice shamatha, the mind is able to, you train the mind in abiding still without thinking. And then there are many levels to shamatha practice too. But all these levels, actually, Milarepa also said that all these levels of bhumis and the paths and so on are nothing but the increasing clarity of emptiness, one's realization of emptiness. So one's seeing of the true nature of mind becomes more and more clear. Wisdom becomes more and more clear. It's just like the mud in the water settles, and then once the mud has settled, you can see all the animals in the ocean. You can see the bottom of the ocean. Now, sometimes when you have a body of water that is very muddy, even if it's just a small body of water, if it's really muddy, you cannot see anything. You can't see the surface or the bottom or anything in there. So that's actually how one is introduced to the practice of calm abiding, of meditation in the Dzogchen tradition, where it says you should just allow the mind to settle in an uncontrived, unaltered state. It is just like allowing the mud in water to settle on its own. So if you just stay still, then the mud will naturally settle. And then when you look at that cup of water, it is completely clear. So if you want to clear the mud, then you must not analyze whatever arises, follow whatever arises. Just rest naturally in the natural state. So in a Dzogchen path, one takes this as an example for one's meditative stabilization. And so then when you gain the experience in practicing, whatever thought arises, don't cling to it. So when we speak about achieving a state of non-conceptuality, that does not actually mean having no thoughts. But non-conceptuality means that even though thoughts arise, you do not follow them. You do not pursue any of those thoughts, but you just let them be. So thoughts do arise in a non-conceptual mind, but there is an awareness that recognizes them, that feels these thoughts. And then that awareness does not become controlled by that thought. And then the thought will diminish on its own. As it is said in the 37 practices, appearances are one's own mind. Everything is your own mind. The object that arises and the object at the place from which it arises and the one who perceives the object, it is all one and the same, like space or like a vast ocean. And when you realize that, you see that thoughts are not separate from mind. They're just like waves on water. And when you see that, you will become fearless. because you have gained the experience that if you simply let it be, whatever arises will become liberated on its own without you having to do anything to it, without altering that state in any way. And then you sustain, you habituate to that until you are able to sustain such a state of calm that sees, which is the Vipassana, especially insight, for any given period of time. And not only are you able to stay within that state, even if thoughts and afflictions arise, they will not harm you in any way. They will not move you from the natural state. So it is said, do not lose the stability of clear awareness. So nothing else is actually needed. Just remain unwaveringly from clear awareness. Then even if thoughts arise, they will not harm you in any way, affect you in any way. And in this way, they become naturally liberated on their own. So at that time, when you rest within the natural state of the mind, you experience the state that we call clarity and emptiness. And clarity means that you know the awareness knows whether or not thoughts are present. That's the clarity. And then emptiness is that you simply let be whatever arises. Whatever arises, you don't grasp at it, but you recognize its lack of inherent existence. So this understanding, this realization comes from the quality of first having developed Shamatha or calm abiding. So when you realize it in this way, you have gained at your first or some understanding, and then you continue to sustain it so it becomes longer and longer. So first you practice Shamatha, and then you practice that over and over again until you gain stability. And then you practice Vipassana, which is the clarity of the mind. And so Vipassana, special insight, is also explained as seeing what you have not seen before. You are seeing the true nature of the mind as it is, but you haven't seen it before. So that is when you gain a certainty in the actual nature of the mind. For example, the instructions on Mahamudra that you have received, that's when you realize this is really what is meant with the mind is all pervasive, just like space. Pervades everything. For example, it pervades my body and everything on the outside, the outer world. A second. And so in this way, as you continue to practice and gain an experience, it is through the experience that slowly a certainty will arise. Milarepa also had said that meditation must be imbued with experience. And then he said, isn't there a disciple who possesses such uncontrived experience? So all meditation must become an actual experience, be imbued with experience. And only then you will gain complete certainty in your realization yourself. And until then, you rely on words and mere understandings, and mere understandings or words that are not founded on an actual experience will not benefit you a lot. So these words by Milarepa are extremely important. The meditation has to become an actual experience. Because when it comes to knowledge, we all know things. We can speak very eloquently about the different bhumis and the paths. We can list them all and can speak about all of it. We understand all of it. But then the moment you're actually looking inward and you're trying to meditate, you can't stay still for just a second, for just a moment. And you're constantly tossed around by ordinary, unrestrained thoughts and afflictive emotions. And then you begin to analyze them and you think that this is, it's this and it's that and so on. And in this way, you're not actually having a meditative experience. And so that's why Milarepa said meditation practice must be imbued with experience. So, so this is how you should practice Shamatha first. So the experience gained in the Shamatha practice is that first, when you look at your mind, thoughts arise in the mind. And the first experience that you gain is how the thoughts that arise are liberated naturally, meaning that they dissolve on their own. That's the first experience. And then the next experience that you gain is that how you are training, that the thoughts that arise and the afflictive emotions actually are like a training, and it's through the thoughts that you are training the mind in awareness, in clarity. So it is just if you do not become controlled by them, if you follow those thoughts, then they do not become training, but then they lead to confusion. And then you continue to think of me and I and so forth. And it starts with very subtle thoughts of hope and fear. And then you follow these thoughts and you become confused. And then they become very intensive thoughts. But then on the other hand, if you seize these thoughts, these subtle thoughts with awareness, you will not follow them. And then no matter how many arise, you will not become controlled by delusion. And then they will not affect you in one or the other way. And that's the next experience that you will then gain through stability. So it is just like I mentioned before, like the ocean, water, and the sky, and so on. And so for example, when you're like another example, a personal example about this, the water and the ocean water. So the stability that you gain or the experience that you gain here through the meditation is similar to going surfing in the ocean. And in the beginning, you can't stay above the waves, but once you have gained some training, once you have trained, then you will be very skilled in riding the waves on the surfboard. I, for example, I'm not like that. So for example, one time we were on the beach and I went into the water and I was swallowed up by a wave and I came out with a mouthful of sand. This is not the way to do it. To just run in and then come out with a mouthful of sand, which is just like saying, I'm going to meditate, I'm going to eliminate all the afflictive emotions and so on, being a little bit overly confident. You have to gain the experience in order to have the confidence of riding the waves of the ocean or eliminating the waves of the afflictive emotions. And only when you gain the experience, then you will become fearless. And without any fear, you can just go into the ocean and ride the waves. So this is how we train in a sport physically. And in a similar way, we are also training our mind. So in Buddhism, we are training the mind. And so how are we training the mind? Through the afflictive emotions. And when, especially from the perspective of realizing the view of Vipassana, in order to realize the view of Vipassana, we must train in awareness through utilizing the afflictive emotions. They become our training. And then finally, as a result, Shamatha and Vipassana become unified. So the view of Vipassana is founded on the stability of Shamatha. And that it is through Shamatha then that you will be able to sustain the state of calm in all your activities. So all your day-to-day activities all become Shamatha, all become a state of calm abiding. And then there is no more difference between meditation and non-meditation, all becomes meditation. But until that, you must habituate training to unify Shamatha and Vipassana. So again, what is Shamatha? It is the thought-free mind. And then what is Vipassana? It is the awareness that knows whether or not a thought arises. It's the clarity. It's the clear awareness that recognizes. That's Vipassana, a special insight. And so this awareness, this clear awareness must gain stability. and gaining stability, it will not become controlled by afflictive emotions. And as a result, you will not accumulate karma. And then in the end, thoughts arise, but are naturally liberated. So the arising of thoughts and their diminishing happen simultaneously if you just let the thoughts be without grasping at them. And so therefore, it's important that you reflect on that, thinking about what's the benefits of having such a state of calm and what's the shortcomings coming from not having it, not having this experience. So therefore, I feel it's very important that you gain an actual experience.
Later, control bio, so that just Jolam Kami, Lani Sodium and Sobanami, Don Jolam, County Jolam, Jesse Chang, and simply chapter Rashi, so Trinchita, she lady, Yori. Trinchi, Yuli, bio, Bachate, bio, Batility, she this Lekari, and you want not to come, Germany, Shadow, Diwan, Masha, Child, Yori. Shala, some girls, some Rampon, Kaka, Mari, Kangli, Kaka, but just same the Yoma, dance on the same corner, Rangi, the shop, Child, Yori. Pena, Tata from Dr. Peja family. Te Yimba Tala carry Tata. Mineta Roba Gavisi in Koto, Studio Wata Shele Gomna, Shele Gomba Cavitali, Tim Shelek and Yamatali, Ragabara, sorry, Mutami, and the Shara Tongue, the country. Tongue, Tate, Kaina, Tayan, Tesom Jerry. Roboting so everything Kong Chile Gom to me must be Rattle so chatted that day, Tina, dogs of their tongues. The needs not calling Chiba Getty, my guitar, charge, what else so chatted the way the near dogs or time near is until the daughter of the Teta Jerry did. Tom took it, send the cassette towns, send the chapter already. This lady, cassette going to set the sub door, tell to half or but they chap the half go, not the other music chap, not the Sabbath sending a chap go. Simply tell me for some of the tail or charter with donate some of them. This is the donated and the try the rugby yams and young. They didn't need it, semi again. 3 day, man, oh, man of having 17 참수들이 찾아고요래. 대 사바체미 고베 대 차로는 거래 세군에 찾고요래. 대들이 실에 보면들이 무시하더니 찾고요래. 대왜 대다왜 샤로를 때는 무시더라. 무시기 셰드체에 고고상 로체 대제는 뭐 대제들이 나다 게임을 배송하래. 다다롱 띵종디스 가로 체도 많이 제서 다다롱 띵 가리 좀 가로 체 당가 잡고 양아데 깨지래 웅요래. 나도 깨질 나라용 띵에서 용사 띵이 저거래. 제 나이도 봐도 뒤에 때리들이 그냥 차가는 거요래. 제 많이 왔지. 자고 용띠 째서나 때려 롬심에 발쇼지 맞게라 동네 니가 또 째서 맞게라 니도 장이나 또 가래잖아 이제 냐마니 조를 파 뜨리를 조를 마디 고를 자고 용띠인데 지 니가 또 조를 때리 세대 용어지 조를 조를 뜨리 샤도 조를 축고요 말이 근데 실례가 아니는 들이 무시 샤용 거요래 제 sem랑 그 sem을 가리 차올라 지랑 또 고를 가려랑 시를 배제다가 무시 찾게 요리 같이 대다들이 샤나테 다시 내게 남다가 용띠 되리 대다들이 이제 말하는 배송들이 사람들을 봐서 제일 안지 돈이 just 안상세 봐라 사람들을 봐서 제일 남다가 되어 이제 제일 어때 다시 내랑서 보면 무시 차야가 들이 돼서 라서만 담을 용띠만 보게 용띠 제로 까지 론세마게 로시마게 대한들이 냐바니 좋다고 그래. 자무 용띠 마저라리 될 차발이 그런 거래. 니부터 또라더니 또잖아. 대들이 당진이 제시 좀 땅에 대왕도 와도 동의만도 와지 대자서 되게 차당 차를 잡아주려도 우 지사부들이 년시기형을 지갑이 대학 돌고 오 통감만 떠와서 땅상 데려서 세마티바들 대학 나도 이거 돌려진 장이 나도 소소 마음생인데 대기는 들이랑 속고 따와서 상마 착을 그래서 또 다다용진 연구요래 종류 체를 됐다는 연구요래 강의용지 생비용지 생비용지 뜻했다고 토요를 남이 난 거래지.
So Shamatha, so what is Shamatha? So the Shamatha is the state where the mind is able to abide calmly in the natural state. And so then when you stay in a tranquil state, there is heedfulness or conscientiousness. It is said that heedfulness is the basis of all good qualities, and that also arises from Shamatha practice. In the 37 Bodhisattva practices, it says in brief, in whatever you do, look at the state of your mind. So in your practice, the Shamatha practice must become combined with mindful awareness. So first, if you're mindful, mindfulness leads to heedfulness or conscientiousness, and heedfulness is the actual state of Shamatha. Then the heedful conscientious state is the state of Shamatha. And then within that state, whatever thought and afflictive emotion arise, they arise on their own and are naturally liberated, and you will not become controlled by them. That is what we then call the union of Shamatha and Vipassana. So Shamatha and Vipassana are not separate. And how are they not separate? How are they one? So in the context of Shamatha, first, the muddiness of the mind is cleared away. The mind calms down, thoughts are pacified, and you come to the natural state where a wisdom, a clear awareness reveals itself. And that is Vipassana, special insight. And we have said it is like this vast ocean. A sign is that the experience becomes like this vast ocean or the sky. Now, for example, the one time in our homeland, there was some lamas who practiced with great diligence. They practiced some shamatha, kind of on the hills in the countryside. And now when you practice shamatha, it is also said that you develop certain clairvoyant abilities. For example, you're in one place and then you're able to see something that an object or so that's at a different place and so on. So it just appears in your mind. But then, they practice there. So these masters, they practice there. And then one developed some doubt about the other. And so then he asked that, that we're both kind of testing each other. And then one asked the other, so up there on that mountain, is there any cattle? Is there any animal up there? And so then he saw it, the other meditator, and he said, yes, there is. And so then, and there really was actually. So he saw that. And so this is how sometimes one is able to see certain things that are not right in front of one as a result of shamatha, of calm abiding, when the mind is very still. But then still, certain doubts may arise within the mind. And so the reason why one is able to see is because in that state, the mind is pervasive, all pervasive. And the more you meditate, the more you habituate, the more clear your mind will become, the more clear the seeing will become. And then there will be less doubts and more clarity as to what you're seeing with the all-pervasive mind. And so what is it actually? How is it actually that the mind pervades? Is all pervasive. It is through immeasurable love. And that's why immeasurable love is the basis of practicing shamatha. So when you cultivate immeasurable love, you must first bring to mind the suffering of all the limitless sentient beings, their karmic visions and all their suffering. It has to be very clear in your mind so that a real feeling arises in the mind. You really experience their suffering. And then immeasurable compassion arises. When immeasurable compassion arises and you only recite, for example, one Mani mantra, that will naturally pervade all mother sentient beings instantly. It is the immeasurable love and the compassion that actually pervade all sentient beings. And that is why it must be the foundation of Shamatha practice. And that is also why it is due to this all pervasiveness and the stillness of the mind of Shamatha. So the pervasiveness of love and the stillness of Shamatha that then leads to various clairvoyant abilities. However, you should not meditate with that intention, thinking that I want to meditate so I will gain some clairvoyant abilities, some special powers. So this is not how we should practice. Also, Milarepa had said that. So when he said that when positive signs arise in meditation, do not become overjoyed and arrogant about them. And when negative signs arise, then do not cling to them either. Because the moment you cling, for example, you think that there's this special thing that a clairvoyant power that you had gained, then you think about it and you think that, oh, I really have this special quality. And in that moment, the I has already appeared again, and that will obscure the mind again. The self-grasping is like a demon. And from that, again, then thoughts of attachment and aversion will arise. Also, Majid Labdun had said, when good qualities arise, however great your qualities, do not develop arrogance regarding them. And when negative qualities, so to speak, arise, do not lose heart, do not lose your courage. In brief, do not grasp at anything at all, whether it is positive or negative. Then the mud in the water will just naturally calm down or clear. So the mind will become clear. And so in this way, you should practice Shamatha. And so now regarding this clairvoyance that can be developed through Shamatha, it is almost like, because the mind is so pervasive, it is like knowing, for example, what's in your own belly. You just know what's there. And that is actually a sign and kind of a mark that indicates an indication of having developed shamatha or calm abiding. So again, Milarepa had said that the practice that we engage, all the practices that we engage in a meditation practice, is a increasing clarity. So the bhumis and the paths, progressing on the bhumis and the paths, is nothing but the increasing clarity of one's realization of emptiness. And therefore, a disciple needs indications that indicate that the mind is becoming more and more clear. For example, the clairvoyant powers of seeing where things are like an indication that shows you that the mind is very clear, that you are progressing along the path. But then again, whatever good quality arises, you should not develop pride or arrogance regarding them, but let it all be equal. Just let it all settle in a state of great equanimity. And in this way, whatever arises becomes liberated. Because otherwise, for example, if a positive quality arises and you fixate on it and you do not liberate it, then it will turn into attachment in a coarse thought. And then if you cling to a negative experience, a negative thought in your mind, then that will turn into a resentment and self-grasping. And so we think that way naturally because the self wants to be happy and it doesn't want to suffer. And that is why once it is in place, there will always be those thoughts of attachment and anger. And the subtle counterparts to attachment and anger are hope and fear. So there is this subtle thought that arises of this is like a fearful thought or a hopeful thought. And in this moment already, this I has arisen. This is so nice, and so on. So this needs to become liberated when you through recognizing that it has arisen. And so likewise, so if you can think about it in this way, when something good arises and when something bad arises, for example, you have a negative dream, an ill-omened dream that makes you feel upset and sad. Again, that's just a thought, a thought of me that arises. It is a dualistic thought. Whatever arises, whether it is positive or negative, let it all be naturally and don't follow it along. And so then when it all settles down, the mind rests in a clear state of Vipassana, and where you gain, in Vipassana, you gain clarity. So in this way, you should train in Vipassana and Shamatha until you attain these signs, until the signs appear that indicate the progress in the practice. And you reach that state through practicing meditation with great diligence. So, so these are the qualities that can arise as a result of having practiced Shamatha and Vipassana.
생분 내로부터 돌아들어들이 생분 내로부터 똑바로 상지에 대해 난 그 생분 내로 돌아 선데 그 나신 상지에 정말 대매들이 냠이 탐지에는 속다다를 대해 그래서 등을 돌고는 내가 돌고 오래 대화들이 보죠 매번 대화 좀 축구 대화 제보도 대화 생분 내로 코로나를 안지 대화를 대화 제보 대도 셰들은 등을 탐타라 동안 매번 대화치 못해서 시와 대화치 시대에서 거리 드리트는 드린 냠이지 대화테인데 대조람 탐지를 돼서 대실은 요래 그 봐요 봐 대실은 뒤는 시랍대 상통을 너무 무심히 대시 상통을 선 봐요 당에 자고 봐요 봐 제고 사 봐요 대신에 준비 샤라송데 딘체 베바토람 탐제를 요래 제타들이 냠이나 들이 약본도 때때는 참적이 이방 그렇게 개발하면 샤샤과에 제가 가정마다로 라비오래 제가 같이 라비오래 들 조금만 보여래 들이로는 말까지 될래
You want to become liberated from the ocean of samsara, you must realize the nature of the mind. The realization of the nature of mind itself is what we call Buddha. When you realize the nature of the mind, you see that what you have not seen before. As we said, I have never seen that my mind is actually Buddha. So that is the life force vein of all practice. That's the heart of all practice. If you want to become liberated from suffering, this is what liberates you from suffering. And if you want to achieve happiness, this is what leads to happiness. And it leads to the unchanging happiness, the great bliss of the Dharmakaya is realized by recognizing the nature of the mind. When you see the nature of the mind, you realize that your natural state itself is the nature of great bliss. Your true nature, the nature of the mind, is the greatly blissful Dharmakaya. And so this, and within that state of blissful Dharmakaya, there is no suffering, there is no thought. So when you have trained in that, you free yourself of suffering, you free yourself of thoughts, of thinking. That is the heart essence of all practice, and that is what we call the union of Shamatha and Vipassana. So again, Shamatha, calm abiding, is the state of heedfulness, and Vipassana, or special insight, is wisdom or clear awareness. It is the awareness that recognizes thoughts arising in the mind. Mindfulness or heedfulness, which is shamatha, also is applied in all day-to-day activities. So in whatever you do, you are mindful, meaning you are careful. I must be careful, heedful in whatever I do. If you are heedful, you have a state of shamatha or calm abiding. And if you are clear, you have a state of vipassana. And in all your activities, in whatever you do, continuously, you should unify shamatha and vipassana in this way. So I hope that you will practice in this way. So for today, I will stop the teachings here. And there were probably some mistakes in what I said, so I confess that to the scholars. I was just speaking all kinds of things, but I did speak to the best of my abilities, but there probably are a lot of faults in what I said. Anyways, Dharma friends, Tashidelek.
Always sangha teju. Padakara ju patam je tuji che long.
Thank you for everyone who joined the live stream, and have a long life.
We'll finish with the yellow prayer book, the long life prayers on page 22. For this realm, encircled by snow-covered mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness. Tenzin Gyatso, Lord Chenrezig, may you remain steadfast until the end of samsara. Embodiment of the three jewels, great being who upholds and increases the teachings of the Shakya lion. Supreme are your activities of guiding others with your perfect deeds. May you, the precious Guru who accomplishes everything spontaneously, live long. Holder of the teachings of the Lord Drigumpa, great Lord of the three jewels, through the power of your peerless compassion and the holy Dharma's peace and light, you bring relief to beings. May your life be long. The one known in the noble land as Arya Deva emanated into the Gar clan of eastern Tibet as Chudingpa, the heart son of Jigding Gompo. May the life of the glorious Garchen remain steadfast for 100 eons. Page 28. May the teachings of the great Drigumpa Ratna Shri, Master of Interdependence, Omniscient Lord of Dharma, who has seen all knowable things, be upheld until the end of psychic existence through study, practice, hearing, contemplation, and meditation. Your 1,000 arms are the 1,000 wheel-turning kings. Your 1,000 eyes are the 1,000 Buddhas of this fortunate eon. Your love is boundless like space. I supplicate to the Bodhisattva Chenrezig.
Thank you so much, Garchen Rinpoche, for your kind and precious teachings. We wish you long life, good health, and rejoice to all Dhamma brothers and sisters. The next segment is at 9:30 a.m. Singapore time. The teachings today will be continued tomorrow at 7 a.m. Do encourage your friends and family to participate. So before we turn on our mic to say goodnight to Rinpoche, please note that break time is till 9:30. Come back by 9:25. And now we'd like to request all panelists to turn on video and mic to say goodbye and good night.
Thank you, Rinpoche.
Good night.
Rinpoche. Good night.
Good night, Rinpoche.
Long life.
Rinpoche, long life, Rinpoche.
Rinpoche, long life.
Thank you. Thank you, sư
Rinpoche.
Bye, Rinpoche.
Good night, Rinpoche.
Arigatou gozaimashita.
Thank you so much.
上面拜拜了，等一下大家宝宝拜拜。
Bye bye.
Bye bye, Rinpoche. Bye bye, Rinpoche.
Bye, Rinpoche.
Bye. Bye, Rinpoche. Rinpoche cái đi thay. Love. Con lên này đi.
Rinpoche 我爱你。
Rinpoche 我们爱你。
我们很爱你。
Please so long. Rinpoche. Cảm ơn Rinpoche.
Cảm ơn Rinpoche. Thank you, cảm ơn.
Rinpoche.
Long life.
Bye.
Wish you long life.
Rinpoche, wish you happy.
我们都爱你。
Chúng con yêu quý thầy Rinpoche. Bye. Good night, Rinpoche.
Good night, Rinpoche.
Bye. Rinpoche, good night. Bye.
我们都爱你。
Sao thầy? Sao ngay?